Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this video that was particularly interesting, or this topic that was particularly interesting. And this is yet again going to be another topic on Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez. But, anyways, when it comes down to it, we're going to review a video by that of Mr. Blue Blood Sports TV. And the reason why I thought that it would be very particularly interesting is because Blue Blood Sports TV in this video, at least from the snippets that I've seen, and we don't always necessarily maybe would see eye to eye, but one thing I'll give Blue Blood Sports TV credit for is this. I would say that he is a certain amount more logical and objective than certainly as some of the other channels that I've seen. I mean, he certainly could be worse. He could be an Aki TV or Dante's Boxing Nation or Champ Side, and don't get me wrong, it's great that all those guys, that they're trying to build a platform and build a brand for themselves. I'm not a person that just tries to tear everyone down, but when you're just spreading a bunch of confusion or bullshit narratives, in order to pretty much tear down a fighter's brand because you don't want them on your top 10 pound for pound list or because you don't want them as a number one pound for pound fighter, then what can I really trust you with in terms of information? It just is what it is. At least when it comes to Mr. Blue Blood Sports TV, once again, I'm not really big on the LDBC or new media. But Blue Blood Sports TV, what I'll say about him is that he does have a certain sense of logic and objectivity. Does that mean that, in my opinion, that he's that way 100% of the time? No. But when it comes down to it, like I said, I certainly would agree with more with his views than what I would with some of the other channels that I've seen. But this main topic, all in all, is basically going to entitle, or it is going to entail, that of Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez and the narrative that certain people all know try to bring out there about Canelo Alvarez allegedly having no big signature wins in his career. Or basically what a certain amount of people may say, excuse me, what a certain amount of people may say, oh, well, Canelo Alvarez, if he really wants to be all-time great, he has to beat an all-time great fighter. Like I review certain Dante's Boxing Nation videos, and, or certain people that try to clearly tear down a fighter, and they'll say, oh, well, where are the Sugar Ray Leonards on his resume? Where are the Mayweathers? Where are the Pacquiaos? Where is this? Where's that? Well, sometimes you just have to take a look at a fighter and say, you know what? They were the best for their day. And as long as you were around during their day, or that you've had enough research, most of the time you'll see that those fighters that for the day, they actually were facing very decent competition. And it's the same case with Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez at this current moment in time. He is facing very, very good competition. But there is a couple of zits on Canelo Alvarez's ass when it comes down to it. What do I mean by that? There's a couple of people overall that are basically always trying to negate his accomplishments when it comes down to it, especially when it comes to Mexican American fighters. And it would pretty much be these four. Juan Manuel Marquez, Eric Morales, Marco Antonio Barrera, and now Oscar De La Hoya. Why do I think that those fighters, all in all, basically have tried to talk down Canelo Alvarez? Because, first of all, I think they realized a very, very long time ago that Canelo Alvarez was basically going to be their replacement. And a lot of people, especially in sports, once people kind of start catching up to them in terms of greatness or their records, or they start breaking records, you notice that all in all, they're still going to try to put their case out there as to maybe why they were greater fighters. Now, Juan Manuel Marquez, he's not going to come out, strictly and say, I think I was greater than Canelo Alvarez, because he's trying to make the point that Canelo, oh, he's not facing any great fighters, yada, 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 yada. But I already made this case in point in the past. Juan Manuel Marquez is not going to come straight out and say that I was greater than I was greater than Canelo Alvarez, but I can tell that he wants to say it. Why can I tell that he wants to say it, or how can I tell that he wants to say it? Because every single time Juan Manuel Marquez or Marco Antonio Barrera or Eric Morales or Oscar De La Hoya or another one of these salty bitch-ass Mexican fighters, when it comes down to it, that get jealous of Canelo Alvarez, they always say the same thing, which is what? In my career, I always fought the best. What is that then basically saying? Basically, there's a reason why I have several losses in my career and why Canelo Alvarez only has that one loss. Because I fought the best. Canelo Alvarez didn't always fight the best. That's basically what they're trying to do. They're trying to make excuses. But when you actually talk to other all-time great fighters that actually have enough confidence in their resume overall to be within that top 10 boxers of all time, they usually give Canelo Alvarez a great amount of praise. The only one overall that hasn't done that lately is Mr. Floyd Mayweather Jr. But the only reason why that is because I think Floyd Mayweather Jr. realizes that maybe eventually there's going to be a push for Canelo to be over him. And on top of that, he has a couple of assets that he wants to be promoted over Canelo Alvarez anyway. Like that maybe of a Terrence Crawford if Terrence signs with him, and of course a Gervonta Tank Davis. So Floyd has his own agenda as well. But if you were to talk to Roberto Duran or Sugar Ray Leonard. If you were to talk to overall, who's another fighter, Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., they all have good things to say about Canelo Alvarez. Now, would they necessarily say that they believe that Canelo was greater than them? No, of course not. They're not going to say that. But they realize all in all that Canelo Alvarez is a real deal fighter. It is what it is. That doesn't always necessarily mean that I agree with their boxing breakdowns. But at the end of the day, there's a saying that says, real recognizes real. It just is what it is. And Juan Manuel Marquez, he's been that main zit on Canelo Alvarez's ass when it comes down to it. That main one overall that's been itching at him for a very, very long time. And he is always talking shit about this dude. Juan Manuel Marquez for the past several years has always said, well, Canelo, he hasn't really impressed me that much. I wasn't super duper impressed and he needs to fight the best of the best. Marquez has been saying that about Canelo Alvarez for the past 25 goddamn years. And of course, I'm stretching that out a little bit because Canelo has only been in the forefront of the news pretty much for the past 10 years, maybe even less. But when it comes down to it, like I said, Marquez has allegedly not been impressed with Canelo Alvarez for years upon years upon years upon years upon years. And every single time that I've heard Juan Manuel Marquez or Marco Antonio Barrera or Eric Morales talk about Canelo Alvarez, they never have anything good to say. Why is that? Because they know that the public was eventually going to put Canelo Alvarez over them, and they would be correct to do so. Because Canelo, in my opinion, is not only greater than them, he's more skilled than any of those fighters. And Oscar De La Hoya now, of course, has joined the salty party because Oscar De La Hoya, he used to have value with Canelo Alvarez because he used to be overall the main cash cow over at Golden Boy Promotions. But now that Oscar De La Hoya no longer has him, he's basically going to go out like that like that one girlfriend overall that's upset that their boyfriend broke up with them. And they say, you know what? Fuck you. That's basically what Oscar De La Hoya is saying to Canelo Alvarez right now. He says, if you want to leave me overall and go, to other promoters, I'm going to overall say whatever I want to about you, and I'm not going to pull any punches. And that's what Oscar De La Hoya overall has basically been doing. That's why Oscar has criticized Canelo. That's why Marquez has criticized Canelo. But you notice that usually the best of the best fighters, they don't usually criticize Canelo that much. Because they realize that with Canelo Alvarez, what he's doing is special. But like I said, there's been a narrative going around pretty much ever since Canelo Alvarez's number one pound for pound spot that he has allegedly no big signature wins in his career and that he's beaten no Hall of Famers and all this other bullshit when it comes down to it. I'm going to talk about that in this video. And we're going to get into that because in my opinion, that's not a point, in my opinion, that really holds a lot of foundation. Not only with Canelo Alvarez, but I don't like it when a lot of people try to use that with other fighters either. Because basically all they're trying to do is tear down a fighter that they have overall an emotional disregard for. But it is what it is. Anyways, we're going to see what Mr. Blue Blood Sports TV has to say. Let's get into it.
What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So we have some very, very, very interesting news. As Hall of Fame, well-renowned Mexican trainer, who's former trainer of the year, Nacho Beristain, and his former fighter, 4-division world champion, Mexican superstar boxer, Juan Manuel Marquez, they have a very interesting take on fellow Mexican countryman, 4-division world champion, Mexican superstar boxer, who's currently the undisputed super middleweight world champion, who was being considered the face of the sport of boxing, number one pound for pound best fighter in the world by many, in Saul Canelo Alvarez. 57 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws, 39 big wins by way of knockout. Canelo Alvarez is 31 years of age, 5'8" with a 70-inch arm reach. With that said, Nacho Beristain and Juan Manuel Marquez, they let it be known that Canelo Alvarez has no signature wins in his career and that the Mexican fan base are not behind.
I would have to see what they said specifically, but you know what? Let me say this overall about Canelo Alvarez's career because I don't really doubt that Juan Manuel Marquez said that because he's been talking shit on Canelo Alvarez for the past several years. And that's the reason why Canelo Alvarez said, you know what? If you hate me that goddamn badly, why don't you get in the ring with me? It just is what it is. And I'm not always overall a person that is a fan of that attitude. I'm not always a person that says, oh, well, you said something that pissed me off. Let's get in a fight. But Canelo Alvarez realizes that. It's like, dude, listen, you're on that bullshit. You've never liked me. You didn't like me several years ago. You don't like me now. You're just never going to like me. It is what it is. So why don't you overall just go back to Mexico and piss off? It is what it is. And I think that's pretty much how Canelo Alvarez looks at it. Like I said, no offense to Marquez, great fighter. And I don't really know him as a person behind the scenes. But you can tell, all in all, that he's a little bit salty that a lot of people are starting to put Canelo Alvarez over him. It just is what it is.
It's just the perception that they're spewing to the boxing world. Now, Juan Manuel Marquez, he finished his career 56 wins, 7 losses, 1 draw, 40 wins by way of knockout, 5'7" with a 67-inch arm reach. As I stated, he's a 4-division world champion. Now, we know Juan Manuel Marquez, he has a very, very huge signature win when he brutally knocked out legendary 8-division world champion, iconic Filipino superstar boxer, who's a future surefire Hall of Famer, in Manny Pac-Man Pacquiao back in their fight in 2012, okay? He brutally knocked him out. December 2012, he brutally knocked Manny Pacquiao out, okay? So with that said, Juan Manuel Marquez, he has a signature win. And not to mention, Juan
Manuel Marquez has multiple signature wins in his career because he was one of the greater fighters of his generation. Juan Manuel Marquez is not to be disrespected. But listen, at the end of the day, if you're going to make bullshit points just because, all in all, you're trying to tear down basically your replacement's career when it comes down to it. Because I know why Marquez is talking this shit on Canelo Alvarez, why he is. He ain't fooling me. He can fool a certain amount of other people, and people will say, oh no, he's saying that because he doesn't believe that Canelo's facing the best of the best. Bullshit. Because even when Canelo was facing 50-50 fights, like against Miguel Cotto, because I was looked at as a 50-50 fight at the time, what was Marquez saying? Oh, I thought Cotto won the fight. I thought that it was a draw, or I still wasn't impressed with Canelo Alvarez. Whatever, dude. Like, at the end of the day, no offense against Marquez, but he's full of it. It is what it is.
Even though...
But there's going to be certain people that say, well, you know what, Marquez is not completely wrong, or these people that say that Marquez has a bigger signature win in his career, that, they're not wrong. So why would you put Canelo Alvarez over Juan Manuel Marquez? Because Canelo is pretty much facing the best guys of his day. We can't sit here and say something like, well, if he would have fought Manny Pacquiao, he would have lost. How do we allege that? Because they're nowhere near the same weight class when it comes down to it. There's no way that we could constitute that. It just is what it is. Sure, Juan Manuel Marquez, he has that big win when it comes down to it, but he also has several losses in his career. Maybe if he would have been someone like a Sweet Pea Pernell Whitaker who only had a few losses in his career, then his career would have been looked at a little bit differently. But he also lost a lot of the bigger fights in his career. Yeah, he beat Manny Pacquiao in that 4th fight. He also lost to him 2 out of 4 times. So it is what it is. And of course, one of those fights he ended up winning by knockout. Another one was a draw. You also lost to several other fighters in your career. You lost to Timothy Bradley, for example, even though you were a bit older. At the end of the day, don't come at me and say this bullshit of, oh, well, Marquez, he has that win over Manny Pacquiao, and that's why I have to put him over Canelo Alvarez. Okay, we'll take this for example. Leon Spinks, who in my opinion is one of the weakest heavyweight champions in history, he has a win over Muhammad Ali. Now, it was a Muhammad Ali that was a little bit older, but still overall was coming off of a win streak. That's like me saying, you know what? Well, Leon Spinks, I think that he's a greater fighter than Mike Tyson. Because Leon Spinks has that win over Muhammad Ali, and Mike Tyson has nothing like a win over Muhammad Ali in his career. That's just stupid. You can't take a look at it like that. Now, of course, Leon Spinks ended up, beating Ali when he was a little bit older. But let's not even compare Leon Spinks if you don't want to do it like that. Let's compare Ken Norton. Ken Norton, he has overall a win over Muhammad Ali when it comes down to it. And that was when he was a bit older, but still overall someone in the prime of his career, I believe. Ken Norton has a win over Muhammad Ali. So I'm going to put him over Mike Tyson. Now, Mike Tyson, in my opinion, he's been a little bit overrated in his career because he lost a lot of the bigger fights in his career. But at the end of the day, you can't put someone like a Ken Norton, in my opinion, who lost the majority of the big fights in his career over someone like a Mike Tyson. It just ain't going to work. Because, sure, you had that one very good win over that certain fighter. But like I said, or like a lot of people would say in boxing, styles make fights. So you can have like a Jermaine Taylor who beat Bernard Hopkins, who was an all-time great fighter. That's great. Does that mean that I'm going to put, Jermaine Taylor above that of a James Toney? Because James Toney maybe would have not been able to pull out the win over Bernard Hopkins? No. You have to take a look at their accomplishments as well. You have to take a look at also who else they lost to. Because just because one person seems to overall, like let me also put it in this, for example. Stan Wawrinka, when it comes down to it, he was able to dominate Novak Djokovic in certain tournaments that I've never been able to see any other type of player, even Rafael Nadal or Roger Federer, dominate Novak Djokovic the way that Stan Wawrinka did. Stan Wawrinka is only a 3-time Grand Slam champion. Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, for example, they all have 20 Grand Slams. That's like me saying, you know what? Stan Wawrinka, since he was able to get the most dominant type of victory over Novak Djokovic, who in my opinion is the most talented and the greatest and the most skilled and the most accomplished out of all three of those players, you know what? Screw Rafael Nadal, screw overall Roger Federer, screw their 20 Grand Slams and all their accomplishments. I'm going to put Stan Wawrinka, the only three-time Grand Slam champion, up there with Novak Djokovic because he had the best performance out of all of them. That's why we can't rank things like that. So it is what it is. But anyway.
He lost a few fights to two fights to Manny Pacquiao, and he has a draw to Manny Pacquiao. Juan Marquez was always very, very competitive with Manny Pacquiao. Some people even thought that Marquez should have gotten a nod in a few of those fights that Manny Pacquiao got the nod in, okay?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that thought that, but if you really take a look at those fights, no, Manny Pacquiao deserved to get the slight edge. Both of those fights, 2 and 3, were very, very close, but Manny Pacquiao deserved them.
You look at the two fights in between. The first fight, Juan Marquez, he was dropped 3 times in the first round. He got up and fought to a draw against Manny Pacquiao. In the 2 fights in between, he kept getting knocked down. The knockdown proved to be the difference in those fights, okay? But with that said, Juan Marquez, he was always competitive in his fights with Manny Pacquiao, okay? So those are signature fights. Manny Pacquiao's a whole...
Yeah, he was competitive in his fight with Manny Pacquiao, but there were certain other fights where he was not as competitive. Just because, you know, this is why I say, like, I reviewed even a video by Chronicles of Judo 144 the other day, and I usually agree with the majority of what he says, but when he said this, I could not agree with him. You know, and for those of you that remember the video, it was another video where I posted, you know, Canelo Alvarez on his way to the GOAT. I think it was posted overall, like, you know, a couple weeks ago by me. And he said, you know, Juan Manuel Marquez, in his opinion, was one of the most underrated fighters of all time. That if you're saying that Manny Pacquiao is a top 3 or top 5 fighter of all time, that you have to put Juan Manuel Marquez there. And I said, nope, that just doesn't make any sense to me. Because if I were doing that, then that means all in all that Jermaine Taylor, in my opinion, he has to be right there with Bernard Hopkins. If I'm doing that, then in my opinion, you know, that means that I would probably have to put Jose Luis Castillo with Floyd Mayweather Jr. Like, you understand what I'm saying? You know, now, not every single one of those situations is the same. We all understand that, like, you know, if you compare Jose Luis Castillo and Floyd Mayweather Jr., there's obviously, in terms of accomplishments, a way greater separation in terms of accomplishments than what there is between, you know, Marquez and Pacquiao. Because Pacquiao is an 8-weight division champion. Marquez is a 4-weight division champion. So obviously both of those guys are all-time greats. But you can't put Marquez on the same level as Pacquiao. And the reason why I say that is because to allege that, you would have to allege, in my opinion, that Marquez consistently won almost every big fight in his career. And he didn't always do that. He lost to Timothy Bradley. Manny Pacquiao beat Timothy Bradley, in my opinion, 3 times. Manny Pacquiao also was able to beat him 2 out of the 4 times. Marquez was not able to do that. All right, Manny Pacquiao was able to beat Miguel Cotto. Would Marquez ever have beat Miguel Cotto? I doubt it. You know, it just is what it is. You know, he also was able to defeat a prime Eric Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera, beat Keith Thurman when he was about 40, 41 years old. So to say that Marquez is on the same level as Manny Pacquiao, no, I'm sorry, I just can't agree.
Canelo Alvarez has no signature fights agreed over any Hall of Famers, okay? Outside of Shane Mosley, but Shane Mosley is seen to be far past his prime. He was 40 years of age when Canelo Alvarez fought Shane Mosley, and Shane Mosley was a smaller guy.
Well, listen, at the end of the day, if you want to talk about Hall of Famers, there's many people that you can allege into the Hall of Fame because the boxing Hall of Fame standards, they're not super duper high. Like, they're not like the NFL Hall of Fame. The NFL Hall of Fame, if you make it in there, you're part of a very, very exclusive club. But the Boxing Hall of Fame, they'll allow almost anyone in there. Like I said, like in my opinion, Paulie Malignaggi should even make the Boxing Hall of Fame. You know, because he's a 2-weight division champion. My standards are this. You know, this is what you have to do, in my opinion, to make the Boxing Hall of Fame. Either have, you know, multiple very good wins in your career or great wins in your career, or be a multiple weight division champion. Someone along those lines. Or if you were a 1-weight division champion, you know, you would have had to have been at the top of your division at one point in time or have a certain amount of title defenses. If we're talking about Hall of Famers, I would put Austin Trout in the Hall of Fame. I would put Araceli Lara in the Hall of Fame. I certainly would put Gennady Golovkin in the Hall of Fame. I would even put, you know, debatably, you know, later on, we'll see how their career goes. You can even debate Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders. Billy Joe Saunders, in my opinion, if you're going to put Jamal Charlo in the Hall of Fame, for example, if you're going to put Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade in the Hall of Fame, for example, in my opinion, Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders, they have to be in the Hall of Fame too. Same thing with Callum Smith. All those guys, in my opinion, are Hall of Famers. That's not even bringing up people like Miguel Cotto and Sergey Kovalev, and Danny Jacobs too. All those fighters, in my opinion, are debatable Hall of Famers. Now, are any of those fighters, in my opinion, necessarily on the Sugar Ray Leonard or Marvin Hagler or Tommy Hearns level? No, but why do so many people always bring up this point? Acting like, we can take a look at Roy Jones Jr., for example, and we can say, you know what, Roy Jones Jr., he doesn't have any wins, in my opinion, that are on the Sugar Ray Leonard or Marvin Hagler or Sugar Ray Robinson or Muhammad Ali level. But at the end of the day, there was no fighters that could challenge him like that. So you have to take a look at Roy Jones Jr.'s resume. And unless he was just fighting complete cupcakes, and I don't know if I would allege that, he still would face very talented fighters, that he would completely dominate. Roy Jones Jr., in my opinion, is the top 10 boxer of all time. You can't always take a look at it and say, well, overall, they never fought people all in all that were as great as this, and this. If you have a fighter, maybe like a Floyd Mayweather Jr. or a Manny Pacquiao or a Sugar Ray Leonard, that were able to get those all-time great wins when it comes down to it, and they were the most dominant fighters of the day, then you have a point. But if you're talking about, a fighter like a Juan Manuel Marquez who has several losses in his career, I mean, that point is only going to work, in my opinion, if you're someone like a Mikey Garcia. Where you're also a 4-weight division champion, but then when I take a look at your resume, and since I was around during your day, and I know overall how good those fighters were and how great those fighters were, yeah, I take a look at your resume and I basically say the majority of the time you fought cupcakes. But Canelo Alvarez is not doing that.
Yeah, his biggest fight of his career is his fight with Floyd Mayweather, but he lost that fight. Okay, now Marquez, he also too fought Floyd Mayweather, and he was outclassed by Floyd Mayweather as well. So they both fought Floyd.
And he was outclassed pretty much just as bad as Canelo Alvarez was. I remember watching both of those fights. I don't remember either of them winning a specific round. So it is what it is.
Mayweather, and the outcome was the same, although Juan Manuel Marquez, he was dropped by Floyd Mayweather. Nacho Barristine has trained tons of world champions. He's a well-renowned Hall of Fame trainer and respected around the sport of boxing, okay? And so he's saying that there's no signature wins, and the fact that people are saying that, the people are for Floyd Mayweather, for Saul Canelo Alvarez in Mexico is manufactured. It's not organic. He stated that, he needs signature wins and he needs to fight the absolute.
Exactly. So basically what my predictions were, they were right on the money. Juan Manuel Marquez believes all in all that Canelo, that this dude overall was hyped up from day one, and that all in all that maybe perhaps he's had it a little bit easier. But he hasn't. Canelo Alvarez has fought a lot of A-grade champions, and he's greater than Juan Manuel Marquez. I'm sorry, he just is. Unless Canelo Alvarez, unless he starts losing repeatedly to Jamal Charlo and David Benavidez and all these other guys. But in my opinion, he's already beat greater fighters, in my opinion, what those fighters were. Ersan Lara and Gennady Golovkin, in my opinion, those are 2 first ballot Hall of Famers, in my opinion. And he was able to get the decision over them.
Best there is to offer. Now,
because really, when you take a look at Juan Manuel Marquez's record, don't get me wrong, some of the fighters that he beat were all-time greats. But when you take a look at some of the other fighters that, that he beat, like a Juan Diaz, is Juan Diaz really someone that, people really take a look back at and they say, oh my God, what a world beater. Or like a Mike Alvarado, or even a Joel Casamayor, or that one Cuban fighter, whoever the hell he was, Casamayor, I believe. Does anyone really take a look back at those fighters and say, oh my God, those guys were really the creme de la creme? Like I say, you have to take a look all in all and say who they beat for the day. Just like Juan Manuel Marquez beat some of the greats for his day, Canelo was beating some of the greats for his day.
I will say this. There aren't any surefire Hall of Famers in line for Canelo Alvarez to fight today's time. There are good fighters that we can speculate, are very good fighters, and you don't know.
I agree, and thank you for bringing that point up.
What the future holds for these fighters, but there aren't any fighters, that you can.
So basically, what is Blue Blood Sports TV trying to say there? He's saying the exact same shit that I've been saying for many, or a long time. So like when Dante's Boxing Nation, when he says some stupid shit about, well, Canelo, he's not facing any Hall of Famers. Dude, if he even defeated the fighters that you wanted him to. When you take a look at Artur Beterbiev and Dimitri Bivol and Jamal Charlo and Demetrius Bubu Andre, do these guys really scream first ballot Hall of Fame to you? I mean, don't get me wrong. I believe that all those fighters, in my opinion, make the Hall of Fame. I believe that they do. But at the end of the day, or that they should make it anyway. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, people are trying to act like Canelo, that he has to beat like fucking Tommy Hearns or Sugar Ray Leonard or Marvin Hagler or some shit. There's no fighters within these weight classes that are on that level. Of course they're not going to be on the level. What do you, I mean, a lot of these fighters, some of them don't even have, 30 total fights. So it just is what it is.
you can look at and say these guys are surefire Hall of Famers that Canelo Alvarez can fight. Those fighters don't exist. You have Demetrius Andre, who's an undefeated two-division champion. You have Jamal Charlo, who's an undefeated two-division champion. And you have David Benavidez, who's an undefeated two-time super middleweight champion. But what would be the signature win for Canelo Alvarez? He did beat Sergey Crusher Kovalev at light heavyweight, but people...
Like I said, all the victories that I mentioned, in my opinion, those are signature wins. If you were a legitimate champion for your day, and you were looked at as a decent opponent, in my opinion, you're a Hall of Famer. But like I said, the standards in boxing, they're not as high as other sports.
Viewed him as the weakest link at light heavyweight, and the other champions who are still currently the champions at light heavyweight are better fighters than Sergey Kovalev. But those fighters, Sergey Kovalev is a Hall of Famer.
I agree, and at the time, he was a legitimate champion.
Much a better beef, who's the unified...
Like, for these same people that always make the same dumbass points of Canelo Alvarez, like Dante, they certainly don't say that shit about Terrence Bud Crawford. Oh, well, is Amir Khan and Kell Brook and Sean Porter a Hall of Famer? I would say all those guys probably are, but I mean, no, like I said, this is why this point, it's only brought up overall to tear down certain fighters. Because it was the same shit that I seen with Floyd Mayweather Jr., and now they're doing it with Canelo Alvarez. And that's why these narratives are just so obnoxious. And that's why I review a certain amount of these videos, because the narratives are just so damn annoying. Because it's like, really? You're really going to bring up the stupid point overall of basically saying, well, what all-time great has Canelo Alvarez really beat? Well, okay, you know what? Then stop giving Andre Ward and Terrence Bud Crawford so much damn credit then. Because what did Andre Ward ever really defeat a fighter that was on the level of a Sugar Ray Leonard or Manny Pacquiao or Floyd Mayweather Jr.? Like, no. Like, come on, man. If you're going to have that energy with one fighter, have it across the board. But like I said, people don't do that because the only reason why they bring up that stupid point is to just tear down one fighter that they have a disregard for.
Champion who holds the WBC and the IBF. Is he a Hall of Famer with 16, 18 fights or however many fights he has in his career? Dimitri Bivol, does he have signature wins? Is he a Hall of Famer? No. And Joe Smith Jr., he's for sure.
I actually disagree. I think that all those fighters are Hall of Famers. But once again, the boxing overall Hall of Fame is not very high. But Dimitri Bivol, in my opinion, he would somewhat be a Hall of Famer because, he has wins over Sullivan Barrera, Joe Smith Jr., yada, yada, yada.
You're not a Hall of Famer. He's a world champion, but he's not a Hall of Famer. Okay? Again, it's super middleweight. He beat the champions there. Caleb Smith, is he a Hall of Famer? No. You look at Billy Joe Son.
I would say that these guys are Hall of Famers. I would just say all in all that, like I said, they're not, if you were to take a look at it and if there was ballots, maybe they're not first ballot Hall of Famers, at least quite as of yet. But that's why that's so annoying when it comes down to it, because people always use that fucking excuse overall, no matter what sport it is. Was this dude a Hall of Famer? And their career only has been going on for a certain amount of years. Like who actually brings up that dumbass point? Like, come on, man.
Is he a Hall of Famer? No. And Caleb Plant, is he a Hall of Famer? No.
That's like if Terrence Bud Crawford defeated Jerome Boots Ennis next, which is a very, very good fight. Or if he went to fight Virgil Ortiz, and that's like me saying, oh, well, that's a shit fight. That's not even a signature win because are those guys Hall of Famers? Like, who would actually be dumb enough to bring up that point? Like, just, good God.
Okay, so where are the Hall of Fame fights for Canelo Alvarez? Okay, because again, like I said, Jamal Charlo's a good fighter, but is he a Hall of Famer right now? No, he's a two-division world champion, but is he
In my opinion, I would say that he is a Hall of Famer, actually. Now, a lot of people would disagree, but I've seen lesser fighters, in my opinion, make the Hall of Fame. Well, actually, you know what? I would have to take a look. But like I said, I would even put certain fighters like Adrian Broner and Paulie Malignaggi and Zab Judah in the Boxing Hall of Fame. So, I don't know. It's up to you.
Hall of Famer? So what would be the signature win for Canelo Alvarez to prove to the people that he's a...
Now, if you're talking about a fighter, maybe like a David Lemieux, that maybe just won one belt in their career and they never were able to win another one and they kind of were just a gatekeeper, then, you have a case that they weren't really a Hall of Famer, So, yeah, like I said, we'll see with Kylan Smith. We'll see with, what the hell's his name? Caleb Plant, yada, 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 yada.
Hall of Famer. Now, I know a lot of people will look at fights like, oh, he didn't fight Andrade. He didn't fight Jamal Charlo. Right, he didn't fight these guys, but at the end of the day, I believe he's going to fight Jamal Charlo May 7th, Cinco de Mayo weekend. But is Jamal Charlo going to represent a signature win for him? Should he beat Jamal Charlo?
I agree. Thank you for bringing up that point, Mr. Blue. And that's why I like your channel a certain amount more than some of these other channels. Once again, that doesn't mean that I agree with everything that the man says. But you can tell that he has a certain amount more logic and objectivity than some of these other damn channels that I've seen that have no damn sense at all. Exactly. Because these people that complain and bitch and moan about these Canelo Alvarez, oh, he don't have any signature wins, just like they would with other fighters that they don't like. Well, what the fuck is going to be a signature win? Because is Jamal Charlo or Demetrius Bouba-Andrade or David Benavidez, if they retired today, are they really truly first ballot Hall of Famers? So it's like, what are you bitching about? They're just bitching overall to bitch, basically, at the end of the day. It's just the person that's not happy because they don't like Canelo. It is what it is. It's just like the people all know that don't like Gervonta Tank Davis. Now, of course, Gervonta Tank Davis, people somewhat have a reason to complain right now because he's not facing any great competition. But at the end of the day, that's like if Gervonta Tank Davis were to face Vasily Lomachenko next, or, Devin Haney, and, someone bitching and moaning and saying, well, those guys aren't really first ballot Hall of Famers right now, so, overall, we can't put them on a high level. Like, that would just be stupid.
Well, Jamal Charlo in his career only beat 2 world champions. Okay? How many world champions?
Thank you, sir. I've been saying that about Jamal Charlo for the longest damn time. People have been alleging that Jamal Charlo has been this alleged top 10 pound for pound fighter, all sort of bullshit. This is why I keep saying about Jamal Charlo. Not only when you take a look at his skills, but his accomplishments and his resume. He's not above Billy Joe Saunders or Caleb Plant. He's not above any of these fighters. This is why I've never gotten this point. People always try to say that he's so far ahead of everyone else. How? Who has the man legitimately beat? I mean, he beat J.R. Williams. I'll give you that. And, shit, the other champion, I can't even think of it.
It says Demetrius Andrade beat. Is that a signature win? Should he beat Demetrius Andrade? Okay. Where's the signature fight? It may be just a situation where it's error. Okay. It's not Canelo Alvarez.
Exactly, sir. I agree with you.
Alvarez's fault that those signature fighters and signature wins aren't available to him. Now, I do agree. One fight that I feel like he should call out and try to push for this fight and make it happen would be to look to face and call out Andre S.O.G. Ward. Andre Ward is retired, but Andre Ward...
That would have been an all-time great win. That probably would have been the greatest win of his career, debatably anyway. It would have at least been up there with Gennady Golovkin, possibly even more, of course, because Andre S.O.G. Ward at one point in time was the clear number 1 pound-for-pound fighter, at least in the clear discussion of it. But unfortunately, Andre Ward and Canelo, that's probably never going to happen. Andre Ward hasn't fought in several years, and, he retired quite a bit ago.
Still relatively young, okay? Andre Ward, retired early because of injury. Andre Ward is already in the Hall of Fame. Andre Ward is a 2-division champion, but he's an Olympic gold medalist. He retired.
Yeah, like I said, that's like me overall debating that Andre Ward is not in the Hall of Fame because I'm like, well, you know what? When we really take a look at Mikhail Kessler and Carl Frosch and Chad Dawson and Sergey Kovalev and yada, 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 those guys aren't really all-time great fighters like some of the other guys like I've said. Like, would you really be stupid enough to make that point? Like, come on, man.
Defeated, and he won the Super 6 tournament. He beat Hall of Famers. Andre Ward is a signature fight for Canelo Alvarez. If Canelo Alvarez needed a signature win, if he ever needed a signature win, well, I believe Andre Ward...
That would be a great fight, but I don't think it's going to happen. First of all, I don't know if Canelo Alvarez would call out Andre Ward. Not that maybe he would not be someone interested in it, but, I'm not saying that the fight is not somewhat appealing, but, what the hell does it really matter for? First of all, it's a very dangerous fight. Andre Ward has a style that probably would trouble Canelo Alvarez quite a bit, and he's bigger than him when it comes down to it in terms of stature and in terms of size. And what the hell, what does he really overall have to gain for fighting someone that's like, 35, 36 years old now? If you beat him overall, people are just going to say that you beat someone that was old and out of their prime. And then on top of that, if you lose, then it looks even worse. So it's like,
represents that.
It's almost like fighting a woman when it comes down to it, or like, one of these female boxers like Clarissa Shields when she calls out, Keith Thurman or something like that. It's like, what the hell is he supposed to do? Is he really supposed to go in the ring and whoop your ass? Or like, then he ignores it and he looks bad either way. So it's like, what the hell is he supposed to do? You know what I mean? That's not me criticizing Blue Blood Sports TV, bringing up Andre S.O.G. Ward. I'm just saying my point of view that I don't think it would really gain Canelo Alvarez at this point in time.
Okay, Andre Ward, 32 wins, no loss and no draws, 17 wins by way of knockout. Okay, 6 feet tall with a 74-inch arm reach. So I think that would be, if he can somehow get Andre Ward, he stated that if Canelo Alvarez had called him out, he would oblige Canelo Alvarez, okay? He would come out of retirement for that fight with Canelo Alvarez. And Andre Ward, he stated that when he was active, Canelo Alvarez never called him out, okay? Canelo Alvarez never pursued him, and when he was active, and they were both active in the height of their career. And Andre...
Well, that is true, but Canelo Alvarez wasn't really at that point in time in his career where he could go up the weight divisions quite as much. Canelo, I believe, when he finally fought Gennady Golovkin, I think Andre was already retired.
What is completely correct. Now, do you look at another fighter that Canelo Alvarez has beaten, Triple G? Okay, now he beat Triple G.
Triple G is the first ballot Hall of Famer. There's no doubt about that. Not only with his title defenses, but he has that great win over Danny Jacobs, and he gave Canelo Alvarez hell within those 2 fights.
Going to go into the Hall of Fame. Okay, Triple G,
I agree.
to me, is the signature win on his career. But Nacho Barristine, as many other people, feel like Canelo Alvarez lost both the fights to Triple G. First fight.
Well, the first fight, I thought Canelo Alvarez lost, clearly. I thought that it was competitive, but I thought that Canelo should have lost the fight. For whatever reason, Adelaide Bird did not have a pair of eyes, but it is what it is. And then, of course, in the second fight, very, very competitive. You can even argue that it could have went either way. But I gave the last 2 rounds to Canelo Alvarez, I believe, which to me was the game changer. I thought that he landed more. I thought that he did more. I gave Canelo Alvarez that fight just ever so slightly.
In the draw, second fight saw Canelo Alvarez get the nod. But Nacho Barristine, he believes he lost those fights to Triple G. So they don't believe that he has a signature win.
Well, guess what? A lot of people also believe that Juan Manuel Marquez lost to Manny Pacquiao. So, and I believe that he did as well. Just because someone believes something, all in all, doesn't mean that it's true.
Triple G, in my opinion, it shouldn't be a future surefire Hall of Famer, but he will be.
I think that he should be.
Triple G doesn't have signature wins.
Let me say this. If you're going to put someone like a Deontay Wilder in the first ballot Hall of Fame, which in my opinion you would, Triple G certainly has to make the first ballot Hall of Fame.
His career, okay? Where's the signature win in Triple G's career? Who did Triple G fight? And who did Triple G beat in his career?
Well, he did defeat David Lemieux and Danny Jacobs. I would not necessarily call David Lemieux a A-grade fighter, but Danny Jacobs was, and Gennady was able to get a very competitive victory over him.
To say that Triple G is a surefire Hall of Famer. The biggest name on Triple G resume is Canelo Alvarez, and he lost, and he has a draw to Canelo Alvarez. And you can speculate that he won the first fight, but even then, it still was a close enough fight where a draw would suffice. Or it could go either way. You understand? So Triple G didn't separate himself in his biggest fight.
Well, he did in the Danny Jacobs fight. Listen, I thought that he clearly separated himself in the first Canelo fight. But in the second fight, in my opinion, he just did a little bit too much watching and not enough throwing, especially in those final couple rounds.
Then you look at Erislandy Lara. I think Erislandy Lara is a Hall of Famer. Okay? But many people felt like Canelo Alvarez shouldn't have got the nod in the Erislandy Lara fight. Right? So...
Well, like I said, we can go overall by what a lot of people feel, but we have to go overall by the facts at the end of the day. Now, if it's a fight overall that ended up being a complete robbery, then of course that's something that's a little bit different. I'm talking about the Erislandy Lara versus Paul Williams fight. The Timothy Bradley versus Manny Pacquiao fight. It looked like, at least now, I haven't watched the full decision, or the full fight, excuse me. But I was watching the first 7 rounds, and I had Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker winning 5 out of the 7 rounds when it came down to. So it looked like that was a robbery to me anyway. If you're talking about, whatever decision you want to talk about, even Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 1, in my opinion, was kind of a robbery because I thought that Fury clearly should have won it. Then those are a little bit different. But if you're talking about a fight that was so competitive that looks like it really could have went either way, you can't really bitch, moan, and complain that, those were quote-unquote robberies because at the end of the day, they were close.
Nacho Barristine, he says that the Mexican fan base is not truly with Canelo Alvarez, and that he needs a signature win, and he needs to prove himself, and he needs to fight the absolute best there is to offer. I know Hall of Famer, iconic, legendary Hall of Famer Mike Tyson, he uttered the same sentiments that Canelo Alvarez needs to fight better opposition.
You know what? Let's actually bring up Mike Tyson here for a second. Let's bring up Mike Tyson here for a second because, a lot of people, they always say how great Mike Tyson is and people love to drool over Mike Tyson. Let's compare Canelo Alvarez and Mike Tyson's career. How many all-time great wins? And in fact, let me just change it to this. How many Hall of Famers, first ballot Hall of Famers, did Mike Tyson ever beat in his career? I think maybe there was one, maybe Michael Spinks. Maybe Michael Spinks. The rest of them, none of them. No other first ballot Hall of Famers were on his record. Who? Trevor Burbick? Not a first ballot Hall of Famer. At least not in my opinion. Older Larry Holmes. So it just is what it is. Who else is on his record? Bone Crusher Smith, Frank Bruno, James Buster Douglas, who he lost to. All right, Tony Tucker. Like, are any of these guys a part of the first ballot Hall of Fame? Shit, I don't even know if these guys are part of the Hall of Fame anyway. It's like, people always love to bring up certain fighters like Bernard Hopkins or Mike Tyson when really in reality, or an Oscar De La Hoya. And don't get me wrong, I think all those guys are, Hall of Famers. But when you really take a look at their career, they left it a little bit to be desired.
Andre Ward, there's many people that feel that way, that Canelo Alvarez, is fighting lackluster opposition. Well, the problem is just who is there available. I do agree that he should fight Jamal.
I agree.
Which I believe is going to happen May 7th. I do believe that he should fight Demetrius Andre. I don't think that that's going to happen ever, and if it does, it'll happen at 175.
Could happen at 168, but if Demetrius Andre is going to get the Canelo Alvarez fight, in my opinion, he's going to have to get a really, really big signature win. Canelo, he just has no interest in facing Demetrius Andre whatsoever. Do I think that it could be partially because he thinks Demetrius is a little bit tricky? Yeah, but I think another part of it, it's like, why the hell would I want to face this dude? Not only overall, is he a little bit of a tricky style, but he has no fan base whatsoever. So, at least when it comes to Jamal Charlo and David Benavidez, that those fights are going to do decent numbers. Don't get me wrong, the Demetrius Andre fight would probably do somewhat of decent numbers, but Demetrius Andre, he's like in a very similar position to what Erislandy Lara is. He's a very tricky fighter, but he's not going to be able to get a lot of the big fights because the promotion usually isn't that great. And he doesn't usually have that, he does not have the same fan base that some of those other fighters have, to get the big fights, to push for the big fights. So if Andre, in my opinion, is going to get that Canelo fight, he's going to have to go after David Benavidez. It just is what it is. Either that or Jamal Charlo, if Canelo Alvarez is able to beat him, or maybe he can go after Caleb Plant. He's going to have to start putting himself in better positions, in my opinion.
I believe that Canelo Alvarez is going to go to light heavyweight and fight and look to become undisputed there. But even if he does, is he going to get the credit he deserves for becoming undisputed at light heavyweight because the level of opposition? They're not Hall of Famers. There's no Hall of Famers in front of Canelo Alvarez that he could beat to solidify himself.
Well, I think that you can debate that they're Hall of Famers, but I agree with you, Blue. I understand what you're saying. There's no legitimate first ballot Hall of Famers that are right in front of, Canelo Alvarez that he could legitimately beat. Because do you really take a look at Jamal Charlo and say, oh my God, that dude is an all-time great fighter? Or David Benavidez, or even Beterbiev Bivol, who I think are still great fighters. But, what would you put them in your top 50 of all time? So like I said, let's keep things in perspective.
I believe
and context.
If he just can beat the people that's in front of him. Because again, he beats Jamal Charlo. Well, Jamal Charlo only beat 2 world champions in his career. He beat Cornelius K9 Bundridge, and he beat...
Oh, God, that's another champion I should talk about. K9 Bundridge, he might be one of the few champions that I would debate is not a Hall of Famer. You want to talk about one of the weakest overall champions? That was the other champion that I forgot that he beat, Cornelius K9 Bundridge. God, dude, that dude was one of the weakest champions of all time. I remember that fight. Jamal Charlo whooped that boy overall like it was nobody's business. That dude was literally just holding the belt. That man was not even a legitimate champion. Because anyone who was going to fight that dude next was going to whoop that dude's ass. Shit, Paulie could have fucking whooped his ass. Shit.
You could say he did beat was Julian J. Rod Williams, but at the time when he beat Julian J. Rod Williams had never been a world champion, and that was his first time fighting for a world title. So you can look at, he did become champion afterwards, but he lost it in his first title defense as well. So it's not Canelo Alvarez's fault that, the Hall of Famers are not available, and the one Hall of Famer
I agree
that he had someone in his prime was Floyd Mayweather, and he lost every single round. So, Nacho Barristine is saying the Mexican fan base is not what Canelo Alvarez as is being perceived, and that he needs signature wins.
Well, I don't know overall what the Mexican fan base is thinking of. I think that the Mexican American fans are very big on Canelo Alvarez. There's probably a certain amount of Mexicans from Mexico that are very big on Canelo as well. I don't know if they don't accept Canelo Alvarez as much. I'm not from Mexico. I'm not Mexican myself, so I don't know. But at the end of the day, Canelo Alvarez, it's very obvious that he has some sort of following because Canelo Alvarez is, every single time that he has a fight, it always does great numbers.
In his career to prove himself. So let's see what happens moving forward with Canelo Alvarez. But that's all I got for y'all. Make sure you hit the like button. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon to get all the new notifications.
But anyways, that's really about it for this video. But I thought that was a very decent point and topic by Mr. Blue Blood Sports TV. And he pretty much overall agrees with what I've been saying for a very long time now. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thanks so much for watching. And we will see who Mr. Canelo Alvarez fights as of next. I would like to see Jamal Charlo because I think that would be the biggest fight in terms of a monetary perspective and monetary value. But we'll see. I'll know what happens. But anyways, that's pretty much all I got for today. I'll see you all later.